just about every aspect of the Srebrenica story is false. You can get a reasonably a full account of what actually happened in Srebrenica in my book, Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War against Yugoslavia. And basically, Srebrenica was a town in the east of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It had been a majority Serb population, and it was largely taken over by the Muslims. And the United Nations Security Council, which at that time was driven by Madeleine Albright, who was the U.S. permanent representative, and by the absence of any resistance from the Russian Federation. The Russian foreign minister at the time was Andrei Kozyrev, now lives in the United States. He was clearly serving the interests of the United States, not those of Russia. But anyway, the United Nations Security Council in 1993 designated Srebrenica as a so-called safe area, that it wasn't to be attacked by the Serbs. Now, one should say right away that it's not a safe area for the Serbs, because, of course, Srebrenica was the center of Bosnian Muslim armed forces. The 28th Division was based in Srebrenica, and this 28th Division used Srebrenica as a base in order to attack the local villages and to conduct massacres against the Serbs. And then when the Serbs retaliated, the media screamed in the way that they usually scream, ignorantly and malevolently, that the Serbs are attacking civilians, the Serbs are attacking a UN-designated safe area. NATO needs to do something. The problem that arose with having Srebrenica and Žepa was very close by Srebrenica, which was also a safe area. The problem was that having these two Muslim enclaves in the east of this purported republic prevented any resolution of the conflict, because the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina could only end through the partition of the republic. So that was the eastern part, which was mainly Serb populated, would become a kind of a Serb entity, the Republika Srpska, and the western part would comprise either a Muslim entity or, as it turned out, a Croat Muslim federation. But the presence of Srebrenica and Žepa there in the east, that would be the territory of a partitioned Bosnia and Herzegovina, prevented any real resolution. And of course, that was the whole purpose. That was why the United Nations Security Council pressed for the creation of these safe areas, because the safe areas would ensure that the partition of Bosnia and Herzegovina could not be accomplished, and therefore the war would never come to an end. So it went on. So from 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995, Srebrenica continued to be the center, supposedly a UN designated safe area, but where there was continual heavy fighting. So finally, in the summer of 1995, the Bosnian Serb forces, led by General Ratko Mladic, decided to take matters into their own hands and try to bring this war to an end. They decided essentially to narrow this entity, compress this entity of Srebrenica and Žepa. But what had happened was that the armed forces, and what they wanted to do was to destroy these armed forces in Srebrenica. Well, these armed forces, the 28th Division, retreated from Srebrenica. They retreated from Srebrenica to the Muslim safe area of Tuzla, which was in the the center but west of the republic. Now, what happened was that these 28th Division were retreating across Serb lines in broad daylight, and they suffered heavy casualties. I mean, nobody does that. In no sensible army does that. You don't retreat across your enemy lines in broad daylight. You can either surrender, which is fine, or you just simply get shot. And that's what happened to the people who crossed the lines. So when Mladic's forces arrived in Srebrenica, they were kind of astonished to find that there were no soldiers here. Where are the soldiers? They asked the locals, where's everyone gone? Where are the men gone? And they'd got no answers. But Mladic then said to the who was left in Srebrenica, which was mainly women and children and old men, he said, well, you can stay or you can go. If you want to leave Srebrenica, then we will provide transportation for you. And many of them decided to leave. And so the Bosnian Serbs provided buses to transport the women, the children, the old men to Muslim-held areas where they wanted to go. Now, those soldiers who retreated, some of them were captured by the Serbs, and then some of them were, as prisoners of war, executed. We don't know how many, but more seriously and more troublingly, we don't actually know who conducted these executions. So we don't know how many were executed, who conducted them, and above all, who ordered these executions, because it's very unclear why there was any need for executing anyone. The one person who came forward and said, I carried out these executions, was a very, very troubled young man, a deeply mentally challenged person. His name was Drazen Rademovic, and strangely enough, he was a Bosnian Croat, wasn't even a Serb. And he said that he was a member of a mercenary force, not really even a force part of the Bosnian Serb Army. He was a mercenary force. So it's very, very, very mysterious. So, and very quickly, a kind of a story went out that 8,000 men were massacred, were executed in cold blood. 8,000 men and boys were executed in cold blood. The 8,000 number was invented. I mean, there was no evidence whatever for that 8,000 number. It came about because of a misinterpretation of a Red Cross memo, which spoke about 8,000 people being missing. But they never said 8,000 had been killed, 8,000 had been executed, or anything. So there were 8,000 unaccounted for. And it happened really almost immediately after the capture of Srebrenica. But it became enshrined in NATO folklore that 8,000 men and boys were executed in cold blood. And then, the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, then started going through all sorts of elaborate mechanisms to try to prove that 8,000 Muslims were indeed executed by the Serbs. So, since nobody knew exactly who was in Srebrenica at the time in July 1995, nobody knew exactly who had left. And the Bosnian Muslim authorities were very, very eager to keep all that quiet. you could essentially just simply invent numbers of people who allegedly were there, who are now missing. We can say that who are dead, and then just say, well, they were all executed by the Serbs. And some of the more honest judges at the ICTY, and there definitely are not many, but some of the more honest judges did raise questions on a very basic level, which was, well, who exactly ordered this? I mean, we keep saying it's this, genocide, but who did it? Is there any evidence pointing to any officer who ordered this execution? And again, we just simply don't know how many were executed. You can find any number of bodies with bullets in them, but you don't know who were the Serbs, who were the Muslims who had been killed while retreating across Serb lines, and who was executed. They weren't interested. I mean, bullet hole is a bullet hole. You can't tell whether how somebody has been killed. Particularly, according to the ICTY, the bodies had been buried and exhumed, and then again they were buried, and again, so it just went on and on. They say, so we really don't know. We know who met what end and in what circumstances. But anyway, we got created, the folklore about Srebrenica. The Serbs, they were the evil ones, and they're ones who are accused of conducting the worst, most horrific war crime since World War II. And by doing this, of course, what the Western powers did was to make the Serbs the most demonized, terrible nation on the face of the earth. And ever since then, every year in July, the world holds its breath and gives a prayer and a shudder for those 8,000 Muslim men and boys who were murdered in cold blood by the Serbs. And the genocide was determined by the ICTY. The ICTY said the Serbs committed genocide in Srebrenica. It was always very strange how one can determine that 8,000 constitutes genocide. I mean, the Muslims in Bosnia, they're alive, thriving. The Muslims are Muslims alive in Srebrenica. They have Muslim mayors currently in Srebrenica. And why is it that there was no genocide anywhere else? It's always Srebrenica. I mean, why couldn't there be genocide in Sarajevo? Why couldn't there be genocide in Žepa? But no. The genocide was exclusively in Srebrenica. So the ICTY came via a variety of convoluted arguments that we don't need to go into now to show that this was genocide. So they had to redefine their terms, and it was the most unconvincing piece of reasoning that you'll ever come across. But ever since 1995, the NATO powers have been very eager to push the Srebrenica narrative, because they have to show, well, look at what wonderful people we are. So now what they're doing is to have this UN General Assembly resolution, and it'll mark July the 11th as the day to commemorate Srebrenica. They tried it before in 2015, which was the 20-year anniversary of Srebrenica. That was pushed by the UK at the UN Security Council, but of course the Russians vetoed that plan. So the Western powers have had to go around the Security Council, go to the General Assembly. And it's, the chances are reasonable that they will get somewhere with that, because there are many Muslim countries in the world, and they get a little hysterical. And many of the Muslim countries got themselves heavily involved in the war in Bosnia. I'm thinking particularly of Turkey. This was long before Erdogan, but Turkey was very involved in the war, as was Iran, also heavily involved, and so was Saudi Arabia, including Osama bin Laden, who spent some time during the 90s in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there was a big Muslim pilgrimage to Bosnia to help these wretched Muslims who were being persecuted by the Serbs. So something like that. I mean, the NATO powers are obviously counting that, hey, we can bring back the good old days of the 90s and have the Muslims on our side. Hey, look, you can't accuse us of being anti-Muslim over what's going on in Gaza. Look how we supported the Muslims in the 90s against the horrible Serbs. The Serbs were the evil ones, and they're Christians. No, we took the side of the Muslims against the Christians. So don't accuse us of being anti-Muslim. That's the attitude of the Western powers.